In the last episode, we talked about why we cook, how cooking food removes pathogens, eases the process of digestion, keeps it edible for longer periods of time, and facilitates social interaction. And we talked about how these things has come together to fuel human evolution and the development of civilization. Today, we dip into gastronomic chemistry, as we'll talk about the basic ways in which we achieve this. How do we go from this to this, from this to this, and from this to this. Welcome to the Conceptual Kitchen. Despite the fancy terms for the specifics, we basically only have 6 different methods of food preparation at our disposal. And those are to create changes in temperature, salinity, acidity, humidity, O2 levels, and to encourage fermentation. All of these have the purpose of killing off and/or making the food uninhabitable for unwanted germs, and to process the strains of protein and carbohydrates for easier absorption within the human body. First up, let's talk about temperature. Most common pathogens dangerous to humans are suited to grow in temperatures between 4 and 60 degrees Celsius, and have their optimal growing temperature at around 37 degrees. One way to rid our food of these pathogens is quite simply to change the temperature of the environment to make it unsuitable for their growth or to outright kill them. On a side note, that is one of the main reasons why the body develops fever as part of its immune system, to change the internal temperature to a level unsuited for unwanted guests. Let's turn the temperature down. At around 4 degrees, we are out of what we call the danger zone of human pathogens. They don't die at this temperature, but the growth is heavily slowed down, but without it being cold enough for ice crystals to form that would otherwise cause changes in the food, making things like salads rather boring. That's why food can be kept in the fridge for a few days, but not longer, since pathogens are still alive, they're just growing very slowly. When we turn the temperature down to -18 degrees, water molecules are frozen solid to ice crystals, and all biological functions have slowed to a stop. Food kept at this temperature can theoretically be kept like this forever. However, different variables enter the equation over time. Temperature changes when opening and closing the freezer, the rare risk of pathogens continuing to grow despite the hostile environment, also known as extremophiles, and so on. That is why 3 to 6 months is the general advised maximum storage time for most fresh foodstuffs. The forming of ice crystals does cause changes in flavor and texture of certain foodstuffs, so some foods are better suited for freezing than others. But what happens if we turn the temperature up instead? The chemical reactions happening when we heat our food are very complex, but basically, when we increase the temperature, 2 things start to happen to our food. Pathogens die off, rendering them harmless to humans, and the long strands of protein and carbohydrates start to unravel, making it easier for the body to consume. Different products start to change at different temperatures. At the low end, tender meat from cows and shrimp start to change at around 49 degrees, and at the high end, some types of dough undergo changes at 90 degrees. So it goes with pathogens living in the food. Some foods are safe to eat at room temperature, such as most vegetables and well-kept red meat, whereas poultry, like chicken and duck, are not advisable to eat with an internal temperature below 74 degrees. There are 2 types of heat involved in cooking: direct heat and indirect heat. Whether you're roasting, boiling, sun heating, or cooking by car driving, the heat process falls within these 2 categories. When you're boiling, heating in an oven, a microwave oven, or performing sous vide, you are cooking with indirect heat, meaning you are causing changes to your ingredients through slow transference of heat from a surrounding higher ambient temperature, or in the case of microwaves, heating the food from the inside through magnetic agitation of water molecules. More about this in another episode. The effect of these techniques is an even raising of temperature of the ingredient without any direct high heat contact point, changing the overall texture, but not the surface of the food. Direct heat is what happens when you're frying, grilling, roasting, or searing. Through the pan, the grill, or the open flame, the food experiences a direct contact with a high heat source, transferring heat inward from the edge. The surface undergoes rapid heating, which creates a myriad of flavor compounds and causes a browning of the surface, or caramelization. And it is this reaction, also known as the Maillard reaction, that gives toasted bread, roasted coffee, and barbecued ribs flavors very distinct from what they would otherwise have if they were, say, boiled instead. There are cooking methods that includes both processes at once, deep frying, for instance, where the food is submerged in oil with a high enough temperature to ambiently cook the insides and change the texture on the outside. But basically, these are the 2 heating tools you have at your disposal when cooking. indirect heat to change the internal temperature, and direct heat to change the texture and flavor on the outside. But we'll get more into this, the specifics of the different heating methods, and how different foodstuffs react to the heat in later episodes. Next week we'll talk about the process of changing salinity, acidity and humidity. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay hungry for the next episode.